Imagine unrolling a brittle clay tablet, its edges cracked with the passing of millennia, and finding etched into its surface not the mundane records of harvests or taxes, but stories of gods who promised to return. These were not the gentle gods of pastoral hymns, but beings described as powerful, radiant, and terrifying, creatures who walked as rulers among mortals and who departed with an oath to come again. In the libraries of Mesopotamia, in the cryptic verses of Sumerian hymns, and in the later echoes carried by Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian traditions, we find a recurring motif. The gods did not simply create humanity and vanish. They stepped away with the clear implication that their footsteps would once more thunder upon the earth. The ancient texts describe the Anunnaki not as distant celestial abstractions, but as administrators of the cosmos, beings whose departure was more like an intermission than an ending. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, we read of gods who still interfere in human affairs, pulling strings of fate and destiny from unseen realms. The returning gods motif carries a haunting suggestion that the Anunnaki may not have ever fully left at all, but lingered in shadow, observing, guiding, manipulating from the peripheries of perception. Every harvest festival that invoked them, every ritual cry for their blessing, was not merely nostalgic reverence. It was an invitation, a summons, a reminder of their promise. Consider the story of Inanna, goddess of love and war, descending into the underworld, only to rise again. To the Sumerians, this cycle was not symbolic alone, but also a reflection of divine beings who move between realms, vanishing from human sight, but never ceasing their influence. The texts carved into stone do not read like myths invented for entertainment. They have the texture of memory, of historical record cloaked in divine allegory. When Inanna promises renewal, when Enki whispers of plans yet unfinished, when Enlil speaks of balance yet to be restored, we are left with the tantalizing possibility that these were not metaphors of agriculture or astronomy alone, but declarations of intent, that one day the gods would walk again among their creation. Think of the uncanny consistency across cultures separated by geography and time. The Egyptians wrote of Osiris returning from death to reign once more. The Mayans carved into stone the belief in cycles of gods who depart and reappear. Even in later traditions, from the Hebrew accounts of Yahweh promising to descend and dwell once more with his people, to the Christian visions of a returning Messiah, the echoes ring like an ancient bell. Could all of these be variations of the same primordial promise? A collective memory of the Anunnaki, etched not only into clay and stone, but into the very architecture of human imagination? If the Anunnaki never truly left, then the returning gods in these texts are not prophecies of strangers, but announcements of landlords reclaiming their estate. Humanity might only be the temporary custodians of a world designed and overseen by beings far older and more deliberate than ourselves. And if they walk again, what would they demand? Gratitude, worship, obedience, or perhaps the fulfillment of contracts never completed, deals made with kings and priests long vanished beneath the sands. The Sumerian king list itself hints at reigns that span thousands of years, reigns attributed not to men, but to gods who once ruled directly upon the throne. And what is more striking is that some of these entries end not with a god dying, but with a phrase suggesting departure. The kingship was taken to the heavens. This peculiar formula does not suggest death, but relocation. The divine rulers did not perish. They withdrew, taking with them the authority of rule, yet leaving behind the suggestion that they would one day return to reclaim it. What makes the motif even more compelling is the language of covenant. The Anunnaki are not described as capricious visitors. They act with the precision of architects, scribes, and lawmakers. When they leave behind contracts, ritual codes, temple rites, agricultural calendars, mechanisms by which humanity sustains contact and fulfills obligations. These texts carry an implicit warning. As long as humanity honors its part, the gods will return to bless. Should humanity fail, their return might come as judgment. Imagine for a moment that such beings still dwell somewhere hidden, watching the rise and fall of empires, intervening subtly through whispers of inspiration or shadowy manipulation of rulers. The idea is unsettling but not foreign. Across history, leaders have claimed visions, dreams, or encounters with divine messengers who guided their paths. From Alexander the Great consulting oracles, who spoke as if channeling ancient gods, to medieval kings claiming divine mandate, one cannot help but wonder whether these were simply human inventions, or echoes of ancient beings still whispering from behind the veil. The texts describing their return also carry astronomical undertones. The Babylonians, inheriting Sumerian star lore, wrote of cyclical movements of planets, comets, and hidden stars. What if these were not merely celestial observations, but reminders of times when the gods' vehicles, whether chariots of fire or craft from beyond, would once again cross the firmament? The returning gods may not descend from heaven in metaphor, but could reappear as travelers from the stars, synchronized with cycles tracked by the ancients, but forgotten by us. We should not underestimate the psychological impact of these texts on ancient peoples. To live with the belief that your creators, your rulers, your cosmic landlords might return at any moment would instill both awe and fear. Entire cultures may have shaped their moral codes, their architectures, their very sense of destiny around the possibility that any day could see the footfall of their makers once more. The ziggurats, those vast stairways to the heavens, may not only have been temples of worship, but literal landing platforms of anticipation, architectural prayers built in stone. There are also darker threads woven through these promises. Some texts do not speak of joyous reunions, but of catastrophic reckonings. The flood narratives, echoed from Sumerian to biblical traditions, are framed as acts of divine reset, moments when the gods returned, not with blessing, but with destruction. To the ancients, the return of the gods was not necessarily salvation. It was an event of total transformation, in which the existing order of humanity might be upended, judged, or reshaped. If the Anunnaki truly promised to return, their reappearance could mean not progress, but purification. One haunting question arises. What if the gods already returned, again and again, hidden in plain sight, their presence encoded in historical upheavals we cannot quite explain? Could the rise of sudden empires, the inexplicable leaps in technology, the mysterious disappearances of civilizations be less about human chance and more about the gods enforcing, withdrawing, and renewing their contracts with us? Perhaps the texts promising their return are not referring to a single apocalyptic moment, but to cycles of visitation woven through human history like tides that rise and fall unseen. Cross-cultural parallels deepen the mystery. In Hindu traditions, Vishnu descends repeatedly as avatars, taking new forms to restore balance in different ages. In Norse mythology, the gods prepare for Ragnarok, not as an ending, but as a cycle in which they will return renewed. In Greek tradition, the Golden Age ended when gods withdrew, yet prophecy suggested their presence could one day return. It is as though humanity across continents and millennia preserved the same haunting expectation. Divine beings step away, but always with the promise, or threat, that they will be back. Now, imagine what such a return would look like in our own time. Not clay tablets, but breaking news. Not ziggurats, but skyscrapers and satellites. If the Anunnaki walked among us again, how would we interpret them? Would we see gods, aliens, or overlords? Would governments deny, negotiate, or collapse beneath the weight of their presence? Would religions fracture, uniting or shattering, as prophecy collided with undeniable reality? The ancients trembled at thunder and lightning as signs of their return. We might tremble at craft descending through the atmosphere, shimmering with technologies indistinguishable from magic. And still, the texts endure. They whisper from beneath museum glass, from tablets dug out of the dust of Ur and Nineveh, from inscriptions translated and mistranslated across centuries. They whisper of gods who will come back. Whether as saviors, judges, or indifferent landlords, the promise is there, like a storm cloud looming just beyond the horizon. We, the inheritors of their words, live in the shadow of that promise, perhaps unknowingly awaiting the fulfillment of an ancient oath. To read these texts is to hear a drumbeat from the deep past, a rhythm that has never ceased, a countdown etched not in numbers but in myth. And if that day comes, how will we respond? Will we kneel as our ancestors did, overwhelmed by majesty? Or will we stand defiant, claiming the earth as our own? The ancient texts leave the question unanswered, hanging like an unfinished verse. Yet, the silence between their lines is deafening, carrying a weight that grows heavier with every century we wait. The Anunnaki's return is not written as fantasy. It is recorded as certainty. The only uncertainty is when. Picture yourself standing at the base of a Sumerian ziggurat, the sun casting long shadows across the stepped terraces, the air heavy with desert dust. These monumental structures, rising like mountains of mud brick from the flat plains of Mesopotamia, were not merely temples to the gods. They were engineered mysteries, each layer a stairway not only upward toward the heavens, but downward into the secrets hidden beneath their foundations. For while most eyes look up at the towering heights, the ancient builders knew that true power was often buried below. Legends and whispers suggest that beneath the ziggurats lay chambers, hidden vaults of stone and shadow that contained the most sacred of relics, or perhaps the most dangerous. The ziggurat was never just architecture. It was theology in stone. Each level symbolized a different realm: the earth below, the sky above, the divine spaces beyond human reach. But beneath them lay a far less discussed domain, chambers carved into the underbelly of the earth, secretive vaults where few were allowed to enter. Archaeologists have uncovered hints of sealed doorways, of tunnels running under the platforms, of spaces that appear deliberately hidden rather than structural. Why would a people capable of building so vast and enduring a structure hide rooms where no worshiper would ever step? Unless, of course, the chambers were never intended for human eyes, but for gods. Imagine a high priest descending into such a chamber by torchlight, carrying not offerings for public ritual, but tablets inscribed with forbidden knowledge. The roar of the crowd above celebrating a festival, muffled into silence below, where the air grows still and the walls seem to sweat with secrets. What lay in these hidden vaults? Or were they storage for sacred treasures, statues, relics, or ritual instruments, or something far more extraordinary? Could they have been archives of the Anunnaki, places where the very blueprints of civilization were safeguarded until the time was right to reveal them again? The texts give us clues. In Sumerian hymns, there are references to the Abzu, the deep, the subterranean waters, and the domain of the god Enki. Shrines to Enki were often associated with subterranean chambers, pools, or hidden sanctuaries beneath temples. The ziggurat may have been not only a stairway to the heavens, but also a gateway to the abyss, a place where heaven and underworld converged. If the Anunnaki still walked the earth in secret, would not these hidden vaults be the ideal places from which they could emerge? Consider the logic of power. A ruling elite that claimed authority from the gods would need both public spectacle and private secrecy. The towering ziggurat was visible proof of divine favor, a mountain carved by human hands where gods could descend. But beneath, in chambers hidden from the gaze of ordinary citizens, the elite could commune with powers in private. The rituals performed in these underground spaces were not for the masses. They were conversations between rulers and gods, conducted in a setting that magnified mystery. If a king claimed he had spoken with Enlil or Inanna, who could question him when he emerged from a chamber that no one else was permitted to see, we must also ask whether these hidden chambers contain technologies. Imagine for a moment a device glowing faintly in the torchlight, a remnant of Anunnaki craft stored for safekeeping beneath the mud brick steps. Ancient records speak of me, objects or tablets that contain the powers and functions of civilization itself. Wisdom, kingship, crafts, even the arts of war. If such items existed, where would they be hidden if not in chambers shielded by tons of brick and guarded by priests sworn to secrecy? These vaults may have been not only storage, but quarantine zones, places to keep humanity safe from what it was not yet ready to wield. Archaeological surveys have sometimes found anomalies, voids beneath ziggurats that ground-penetrating radar suggests are not natural. Some have been too unstable to excavate, others politically sensitive, locked away from exploration. The silence of these voids is deafening. They beckon with the promise of revelation. Could they contain scrolls or tablets untouched since the dawn of writing? Could they hold sarcophagi of beings larger or stranger than human kings? Or are they simply empty, designed not to contain, but to conceal their very existence, a secret mechanism of control? Yet, even emptiness can be meaningful. To create a hidden chamber known only to priests and rulers would generate mystery and power in itself. The people would believe in what they never saw, and the unseen would grow larger in imagination than the visible. The chamber beneath the ziggurat thus becomes a stage not for public drama, but for psychological control, a space where secrecy itself becomes a form of divine currency. By keeping the chamber hidden, rulers could claim to speak with gods who dwelled there, and no one could disprove it. But let us indulge the possibility that they were more than symbols. What if beneath the ziggurats, hidden chambers still hold artifacts that could rewrite human history? Perhaps crystalline objects storing information in ways beyond our current science. Perhaps machinery mistaken for myth. Perhaps even entrances to deeper tunnels that connect to vast subterranean networks. The so-called Abzu stretching across Mesopotamia, linking temple to temple, city to city, like an underground nervous system. If the Anunnaki built such networks, then the ziggurats may have been the access points, pillars above ground marking gateways to worlds beneath. The implications are staggering. Imagine an archaeological team breaching one such chamber and discovering not relics but instructions, records left by the Anunnaki, perhaps awaiting the day when humanity is advanced enough to decode them. Would such a discovery confirm that the gods never left? Would it prove that the stories of returning gods were not promises of a future event, but reminders of a presence always maintained through hidden knowledge beneath the ziggurats? Or would the discovery destabilize civilization itself, shaking religions, governments, and identities that rely on human uniqueness? And what if modern powers already know? What if expeditions during the colonial era, when European archaeologists first dug into Mesopotamian soil, uncovered more than they revealed? Some rumors speak of artifacts quietly smuggled into private collections, of vaults beneath museums filled with items never displayed. Could it be that the true treasures of Sumer, the ones that could alter our understanding of history, still lie beneath layers of secrecy as deliberate as the mud brick layers of the ziggurats themselves? Perhaps governments or elites guard such knowledge, fearing the upheaval it could unleash if humanity learned it was never alone, never truly free. The hidden chambers beneath ziggurats also invite comparison with other ancient structures. Beneath Egyptian pyramids, tunnels and shafts extend downward into secret rooms whose purposes remain debated. In Mesoamerica, beneath Mayan temples, archaeologists have found hidden rivers and sealed caves, believed to be portals to the underworld. In India, stepwells descend into shadow depths where rituals were performed in spaces both sacred and concealed. Across cultures, the pattern repeats. What is most holy is often buried, hidden, withdrawn from the crowd. The ziggurats of Sumer fit into this universal language of secrecy. The ancient builders may have designed their monuments to last, but not simply for vanity. A ziggurat is a riddle in stone. It speaks upward to the sky, downward to the earth, and inward to the human heart. Its hidden chambers remind us that truth is often concealed, layered, and encoded. They urge us to dig, not only through soil, but through the layers of our own assumptions. If the chambers beneath the ziggurats exist, then they are not just archaeological curiosities. They are vaults of meaning, guardians of unfinished conversations between gods and men. And perhaps that is the point. The Anunnaki, whether as literal beings or symbols of transcendent forces, may have left us puzzles to keep alive our hunger for knowledge. The hidden chambers beneath the ziggurats are both physical and metaphorical. They represent the depths of mystery, the spaces beneath the surface of reality where answers lie buried, and they whisper to us, across the gulf of 5,000 years, that what is hidden is never truly gone. It is only waiting to be found. Picture a Sumerian temple at night, the ziggurat towering above the darkened city, while within its shadowed chambers, priests gather around oil lamps that flicker against the walls. Their voices are hushed, not because they fear the people outside, but because the subject of their whispers is not meant for ordinary ears. They speak of beings who do not dwell in the heavens, but in the depths beneath their feet, beings older than kings, older than empires, perhaps older than the human race itself. The earth is not empty stone to them. It is alive with hidden chambers, winding passages, and subterranean domains where watchers and rulers move unseen. These beings, they said, were the true governors of fate, emerging only when summoned by sacred rites or catastrophic necessity. In the hymns and incantations preserved on clay tablets, there are references to the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth, the domain of Enki, god of wisdom and creation. To the priests, this was not merely metaphor, but geography, a place of hidden reservoirs, both physical and spiritual, where knowledge and beings resided. When they whispered of the Abzu, they were whispering of more than water. They were whispering of presences that lived in the hollow places of the earth, guardians or jailers, whose forms were never described directly, but hinted at through fragments, serpentine, luminous, or simply overwhelming in scale. The priests lowered their voices not because they doubted, but because they feared the sound itself might carry downward, drawing the attention of what dwelt below. Imagine yourself standing among them, listening. You would hear descriptions of rituals in which offerings were lowered into shafts, grain, oil, blood, disappearing into cracks in the ground, as if to feed a hunger that never surfaced, but was always present. These offerings were not given to sky gods, who had temples and statues. They were given to those beneath, who had no face and no name, only the echo of rumor and the weight of presence. To the common people, the earth was solid. To the priests, it was porous, and the voids beneath it were populated. Across Mesopotamian myths, echoes of these beliefs surface. The underworld was called Kur, a place not only of the dead, but of rulers and judges who enforced laws beyond mortal comprehension. The goddess Ereshkigal was said to reign there, her power equal to that of the gods above. To whisper of beings in the deep earth was to speak of her court, her armies, her messengers who might climb the hidden stairways and emerge into the world of light if provoked. The priests imagined boundaries as fragile. Just as rivers could flood and wash away cities, the boundaries between realms could rupture, releasing beings that should remain buried. Their hushed voices were attempts to control the uncontrollable, to name, even faintly, what should never be spoken aloud. What is most striking is how this motif repeats across cultures. In Egypt, priests spoke of Duat, the hidden underworld where serpentine gods slithered through tunnels of fire. In Greece, initiates of Eleusis whispered of Hades' kingdom below the soil, where mysteries were revealed only in darkness. In Mesoamerica, the Maya described Xibalba, the underworld accessed through caves and cenotes, where lords of disease and death reigned. And in India, there were tales of Patala, subterranean realms inhabited by Nagas, serpent beings of wisdom and power. Always the theme returns. Priests knew something lay beneath, and their whispers were a recognition that humanity did not walk upon solid ground, but upon the roof of a kingdom unseen. Let us imagine the psychological effect. To live in a city like Ur or Uruk, with ziggurats towering above, and to know that beneath those monuments were passages leading downward into the Abzu, would shape your perception of the world. Every tremor in the ground, every unexplained sound from deep wells would carry the suggestion of presences stirring below. The priests whispered so the people would never hear. For the people, the gods were above. For the priests, the gods were also below, and perhaps closer than anyone dared admit. There are stories, half myth, half memory, of priests encountering these beings in states of trance. By fasting, chanting, and descending into chambers with no light, they claimed to hear voices rising from beneath the stone. Sometimes the voices offered wisdom, answers to riddles of agriculture, medicine, or astronomy. Sometimes the voices demanded sacrifice, threatening famine or disease if not appeased. And sometimes the voices were not coherent at all, but strange, overwhelming sounds that left the listener trembling. These priests returned pale, shaken, their whispers carrying not only words, but the weight of experiences they could not fully explain. What if those whispers were not hallucinations, but fragments of encounters with real beings? If the Anunnaki never left the earth, where better to hide than in the depths? To live among the stars requires technology and distance. To live beneath the earth requires only secrecy and patience. The priests may have been the intermediaries, keeping the covenant between surface humanity and its hidden governors. Their whispers were both reverence and warning, acknowledgments that humanity's rule above was conditional upon powers dwelling below. Consider also the flood myths. If destruction came from the sky, waters pouring down, why did so many traditions speak of waters rising from below? In the Epic of Atrahasis, the gods unleashed both rain from the heavens and surges from the Abzu. To the priests, catastrophe came as much from beneath as above. This duality shaped their whispers. To ignore the beings below was to risk awakening forces that could drown the world. To appease them was to buy time, to keep the earth solid underfoot for another season, another generation. Now, imagine the implications for us today. What if those whispers were not superstition, but memory? fragments of knowledge passed in code. The Earth is riddled with caves, tunnels, and caverns so vast we have barely mapped them. Subterranean oceans of water larger than all surface seas combined exist beneath the mantle. Entire ecosystems thrive in darkness, immune to sunlight. Could there be intelligence hidden there, older than humanity, concealed because it has no reason to reveal itself? The priests may have been the first to brush against this reality, clothing it in myth, whispering it in torchlit rooms, because to say it aloud under the sun would have been too much to bear. There are modern echoes. Whispers of subterranean civilizations persist in folklore across the world. Agartha, Shambhala, hidden kingdoms beneath mountains or deserts, tales of beings with luminous skin, elongated skulls, or serpent-like bodies. Scientists dismiss them as legends, but the continuity across time and culture is difficult to ignore. When the Sumerian priests whispered of beings in the deep earth, perhaps they were not inventing but remembering, recording the same truth that others elsewhere also perceived, that we are not alone even in our own planet. The whisper is important. It suggests not proclamation, not teaching for the masses, but communication reserved for the few. Priests knew that to speak openly of such beings would provoke panic, rebellion, or blasphemy. So they whispered among themselves, coded their knowledge into hymns, buried it in the abzu of language itself. For thousands of years, their voices have reached us faintly, through fragments of tablets, through myths preserved in translation. We hear them still, if we listen carefully, voices warning us that beneath our cities lies more than stone and soil. And what if those whispers are not only of the past? Imagine that in forgotten monasteries, in secret sects, there are still those who guard the knowledge, who know that the deep earth is not empty. Perhaps they whisper not in temples now, but in laboratories, in government offices, in the corridors of power where secrets are hoarded. The priests of Sumer may have been replaced by priests of science and state, whispering the same truths in new vocabularies. The beings below have not changed. Only the intermediaries have. So the question remains, if the beings of the deep earth ever chose to emerge fully, would we recognize them as gods, demons, or something else entirely? The priests did not know, which is why they whispered. Their whispers carry uncertainty as much as certainty. They did not proclaim, the gods are here. They murmured, they might still be here, beneath us. It is the uncertainty that terrifies, the sense that at any moment the solid ground could split, and voices older than language could rise again. The priests whisper still through the fragments we inherit. They remind us that the universe is not only above, but below, that the greatest mysteries may not be in the stars, but under our feet. And perhaps, if we listen too closely, we too may begin to hear what they feared to say aloud, that the deep earth is alive, and that its inhabitants have not forgotten us. Imagine walking across the ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, the birthplace of writing, kingship, and monumental architecture. Dust clings to your skin, the sun beats down on bricks that have not felt rain for centuries, and beneath your feet lie mysteries that archaeologists still cannot fully explain. Among the most tantalizing are the sealed tunnels, hidden passages carved by hands long dead, blocked deliberately by stone and clay, their entrances often disguised, their destinations uncertain. They are the arteries of forgotten cities, veins of stone that run beneath ziggurats, palaces, and temples. The question that has haunted every explorer who has stumbled across one is simple. What did the ancients hide so carefully, and why did they seal it away? The surface ruins of Mesopotamia tell us much about power and worship, but the tunnels tell us about secrets. Unlike ceremonial temples or royal halls meant to awe the public, these passages were never designed for open use. They twist beneath layers of history, their walls smeared with pitch or carved with symbols, their entrances often blocked by bricks inscribed with curses against those who dare disturb them. Many have been found by accident, during construction or excavation, and more than one has collapsed before its depths could be fully explored. The persistence of these tunnels across different Mesopotamian sites suggests a tradition, a shared intent, carried forward by generations who believed that what was hidden below mattered as much as what was built above. Priests of the temples whispered that the gods not only descended from the heavens, but also dwelt in the abzu, the deep beneath the earth. If that belief shaped their architecture, then the tunnels may have been more than infrastructure. They may have been routes of communication, ritual pathways designed to reach the underworld. Imagine a priest moving through the darkness, torch in hand, chanting hymns to Enki or Ereshkigal as the walls seemed to close in. Each step deeper carried him closer not to the sky, but to the unseen forces beneath the ground. To the people above, he would return changed, his authority strengthened by the claim that he had walked where no ordinary mortal dared. To the rulers, these tunnels offered not only privacy, but proximity to the divine. Archaeologists have speculated many practical purposes: drainage systems, escape routes, storage vaults, and in some cases, they may be right. Yet, the deliberate sealing of so many tunnels suggests otherwise. Drainage systems are not sealed with curses. Storage vaults are not hidden beneath temple foundations, their doors plastered shut as if to lock away not goods but presences. The effort required to build these tunnels was immense, especially with primitive tools, and the decision to close them off implies fear, reverence, or both. Something within them was meant to remain undisturbed, not for decades, but for millennia. Some accounts speak of tunnels discovered beneath Ur and Nineveh, passages leading nowhere obvious, blocked at intervals by stone slabs covered in bitumen. Workers reported foul air, strange echoes, and carvings on the walls, unlike typical inscriptions. Official reports often dismiss these findings as anomalies or halt exploration due to safety concerns, but one cannot help but wonder whether safety is the true concern, or whether something else has been glimpsed, something not meant for public knowledge. It is as though the earth itself still guards the secrets of the Anunnaki, and the tunnels are their locked vaults. The myths align eerily with these discoveries. The descent of Inanna into the underworld, for instance, reads like a journey through 7 gates, each sealed and guarded, each requiring a ritual to pass. Could these stories reflect real structures, labyrinths carved beneath temples, where initiates underwent trials in darkness? The tunnels may have been physical embodiments of myth, places where ritual became architecture. To pass through them would be to enact the cosmic descent itself, emerging on the other side as one reborn, carrying the authority of one who had walked through the realms of the gods. There are also darker interpretations. Some whisper that the tunnels were prisons, not for humans, but for beings that should not walk the surface. Sealed chambers might not hide treasures, but contain dangers. The bricks and curses were not warnings to the curious, but locks against the imprisoned. This would explain the consistency of sealing across sites, an entire civilization agreeing across centuries that some things belonged only in darkness. The tunnels, then, are not abandoned infrastructure, but containment zones, ancient quarantine chambers designed by those who believed they were safeguarding humanity from forces too potent to release. Modern parallels fueled the imagination. In recent decades, ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery have revealed anomalies beneath Mesopotamian ruins that remain unexplored, either because of instability or because political unrest makes excavation impossible. Some of these anomalies are linear, consistent with tunnels or passageways. Yet, official reports are vague, often downplaying the discoveries. What if governments and archaeologists already suspect what the ancients knew, that beneath Mesopotamia lie chambers that could rewrite the story of civilization? To open them might not only endanger physical safety, but shatter the fragile narrative of human independence. Consider also the symbolic power of sealing. To close a tunnel is not only to hide, but to declare that what lies beyond is not for this age. The ancients may have believed in cycles of time, in epochs when knowledge was to be revealed, and others when it was to be concealed. The sealed tunnels then become time capsules, awaiting the return of those for whom they were intended. If the Anunnaki never left, the tunnels may not be for us at all, but for them, a network of hidden pathways and vaults waiting for their return. Legends in surrounding cultures strengthen this idea. In Persia, there are tales of kings sealing away jinn beneath mountains, binding them with inscriptions. In Hebrew tradition, stories tell of watchers chained beneath the earth for defying divine law. In Greek myth, the Titans themselves were imprisoned below. Across the ancient world, the motif repeats. Beings of immense power locked away underground, their prisons described as tunnels, caves, or labyrinths. Mesopotamia may have been the root of this pattern, its sealed tunnels the prototype for a story told in countless tongues. Now, imagine the psychological weight of living above such tunnels. Every festival, every prayer in the temple, every earthquake would remind the people that, beneath them, in sealed darkness, something waited. The priests whispered, but never proclaimed, for to speak too loudly might awaken what slumbered. The tunnels were reminders of the thin line between order and chaos, a line maintained by brick walls and sacred seals. Perhaps the greatest fear was not that the gods would abandon them, but that the beings beneath would return unbidden, breaking through the seals, reclaiming the world that humans thought was theirs. Today, we walk unknowingly over these ruins, our machines buzzing with signals, our satellites peering down, yet we remain as ignorant as the shepherd who stumbled upon a crumbling brick wall in the desert centuries ago. The tunnels remain sealed, and perhaps that is for the best. But the imagination cannot resist the possibility that behind those barriers lie tablets untouched by time, artifacts glowing with strange energies, or even the remains of beings whose existence would upend our every assumption about history. To open such tunnels might be to break a covenant we do not remember making. The sealed tunnels of Mesopotamia are not simply archaeological curiosities. They are messages across time, deliberate silences carved into stone. They remind us that the ancients did not tell us everything, that for all their hymns and records, some knowledge was buried, hidden, locked away, and they leave us with a question that gnaws at the edges of our certainty. Were the tunnels sealed to protect the ancients from what lay within, or to protect us from the day those seals are finally broken? Imagine the desert at twilight, where the horizon seems endless and silence stretches wider than the sky itself. Travelers tell of mirages shimmering in the distance, of shapes that appear and vanish with the shifting heat. But among the tales of illusions is one far stranger, the sighting of giant shadows, figures so vast that they seem to stride across dunes as if the desert were their rightful domain. These are not ordinary shadows cast by rock or cloud, but towering forms that move against the light, shapes so large they could only belong to beings far beyond the scale of human life. For those who have seen them, the experience is unforgettable, leaving behind not just awe, but unease, as if something primeval had stirred beneath the sand. Reports come from many deserts, the Sahara, the Arabian sands, the Mesopotamian plains where civilization itself was born, truck drivers on lonely roads, Bedouin tribes who know every grain of the dunes, soldiers stationed in remote outposts. Each speaks of shadows that appear where no living figure should stand. Sometimes they stretch across the desert floor like pillars of smoke. Other times they loom upright, moving slowly, silently, against the setting sun. Often they vanish when approached, as if the desert swallows them whole. Yet the consistency of these accounts suggests that something more than imagination may be at work. In Mesopotamian tradition, the gods who created humanity were called the Anunnaki, beings of great stature described as descending from the heavens to shape order out of chaos. The myths never quite say they departed completely. Some texts describe them retreating to the Abzu, the deep places beneath the earth, or returning to the faraway heavens with a promise to come again. If such beings linger still, watching from the margins of human civilization, could the giant shadows be glimpses of their forms, fleeting reminders that they are not gone but hidden, waiting for the right time to reveal themselves? The desert has always been a place of encounter with the mysterious. It strips away the noise of the world, leaving only the raw elements of sand, wind, and sky. It is here that prophets have seen visions, hermits have heard voices, and wanderers have met shapes that defy reason. To see a giant shadow in this setting is to feel the weight of myth pressing upon the present. One cannot help but think of the Sumerian kings, who claimed descent from divine rulers of immense size, or the stories of Gilgamesh himself, said to be two-thirds divine, towering above mortals. The shadows, whether real or illusion, seem to echo these forgotten proportions. Skeptics argue that the sightings are tricks of light. The desert sun, low on the horizon, can stretch a small figure into an elongated phantom. Atmospheric distortions, heat waves, and dust storms can sculpt shapes that appear animate, yet those who witness the giant shadows insist they are different, more defined, more deliberate, moving with intent rather than drifting like a mirage. Some describe feeling watched, as if the shadow were aware of them. Others claim the temperature dropped suddenly, or that an unnatural stillness fell across the desert, even silencing the wind. These are not the hallmarks of optical illusion, but of presence. Legends from Bedouin oral tradition tell of the al-Duwayeh, a towering figure who roams the desert at dusk, her form appearing as a vast silhouette before vanishing into sand. In Iraq, older generations spoke of the al-Ard, people of the earth, giant beings who walked in the time before kings and who sometimes return as shadows to remind humanity of its place. Even in North Africa, Tuareg tribes whisper of shadow giants who march across dunes in silence, guardians or exiles from a forgotten age. The similarities across such wide geographies suggest not isolated invention, but shared memory, fragments of a deeper story. What if these shadows are not illusions, but projections, echoes of beings that exist out of phase with our perception? Some researchers of folklore have suggested that myths of giants might stem from encounters with interdimensional presences, entities that can only partially manifest in our world. The shadow would then be the trace of a body that exists elsewhere, a footprint of something too immense to be fully seen. If the Anunnaki were such beings, part physical, part something more, their presence might be felt not in flesh, but in form, cast upon the earth like a warning. Modern sightings continue into the present. In the deserts of Saudi Arabia, oil workers have reported shapes like columns rising in the distance, only to vanish when approached. In the Iranian plateau, nomads tell of silent figures seen striding at dusk, leaving no tracks in the sand. Even in the American Southwest, stories emerge of giant shadows crossing canyons, tied to indigenous traditions of ancient sky beings. Technology has not dispelled the phenomenon. Pilots flying over deserts have recorded strange elongated forms on the ground, only to find nothing when revisiting the site. Satellite images sometimes capture anomalies that look like immense shadows with no object to cast them. Could it be that the deserts themselves preserve something the rest of the world has lost? In the emptiness of sand, where human presence is scarce, perhaps the giants feel free to walk, or at least to let their forms bleed into visibility. Unlike forests or cities, deserts offer no cover, no distraction. A shadow cast there is impossible to ignore. And so, it is here, in these bare landscapes, that the ancient promise of returning gods may be most visible, not in temples or cities, but in the open, where the sky meets the sand and humanity is dwarfed by scale. Imagine standing alone at night, the stars blazing above, when suddenly a shape darker than darkness itself moves across the dunes. It is silent, vast, almost indistinguishable from the sky, yet its outline is unmistakable, a form with limbs, with height, with presence. For a moment you believe you are dreaming. Then it vanishes, leaving only the pounding of your heart and the certainty that you were not alone. This is the essence of the sightings. Not clarity, but ambiguity. Not revelation, but haunting suggestion. The giant shadows remind us that even in an age of satellites and science, mystery still walks beside us. Some have connected the phenomenon to seismic activity, suggesting that the Earth itself might project energies before earthquakes that distort vision. Others link it to ancient structures buried beneath the sands, their energies or geometries casting effects we do not yet understand. And yet, others believe the shadows are deliberate, manifestations by beings who choose to reveal themselves briefly, not to convince, but to remind. If so, the question is not whether they exist, but why they choose deserts, and why they choose shadow. Perhaps shadow is the perfect medium for gods who never left, but do not wish to be fully seen. To appear in flesh would force recognition, disrupt societies, end religions, topple governments. To appear as shadow is to remain undeniable yet deniable, to haunt the margins without stepping into the center. It is the strategy of watchers, not rulers, of beings waiting, not acting. The shadows, then, may be their way of reminding us that our dominion is temporary, that the earth is still shared with presences older than our species. The connection to the Anunnaki is unavoidable. In texts, they are described as beings of immense stature, their authority unquestionable. Statues and reliefs depict figures towering over humans, holding rods and rings of power. If such beings were real, Their size alone would have left an impression across generations. Perhaps the giant shadows are echoes of that memory, bleeding through time, or perhaps they are the beings themselves, still walking in forms that cannot be captured except as silhouettes upon the earth. And so, we are left with the unsettling possibility. The giant shadows in deserts may not be tricks of light or imagination, but the most honest glimpses we have of powers that never departed. They stride across sands because sands remember. They appear at twilight because that is the hour between worlds, when boundaries blur. They vanish when approached because they are not bound to the rules of our sight. And always they leave the same message, that humanity is not alone, that giants still walk, if only in shadow. The desert keeps its secrets well. Its silence swallows questions, its vastness hides tracks. But the stories endure, whispered by travelers, recorded in journals, shared in hushed tones. Giant shadows still move in the emptiness, as they did in the time of kings and priests. Whether gods, giants, or something in between, their presence lingers on the edge of perception, reminding us that what we see is not all that is. And perhaps, if the Anunnaki never left, the deserts are their chosen stage, a place vast enough to hold their forms, silent enough to carry their message, empty enough to echo their return. Imagine standing at the edge of an ancient ruin, wind sweeping across stones carved thousands of years ago, your hands itching to dig deeper, to uncover the secrets that lie beneath. Yet, a guard steps forward, a fence stands in your way, and a sign reads, "Restricted area, no excavation allowed." For centuries, explorers and archaeologists have scoured the remains of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and other cradles of civilization, unearthing temples, palaces, and tombs. But not all ruins have been explored. Some remain sealed, forbidden, or conveniently ignored. The question that lingers in the air is simple. Why? What do these ruins hide that must never be disturbed? On the surface, the explanations seem mundane. Political instability, lack of funding, fragile structures too delicate for excavation. These are the reasons given in reports and interviews. But beneath those official lines lies a deeper unease. Some sites are not merely overlooked, they are actively restricted. Permits are denied. Military presence enforces silence. Researchers who inquire too persistently find doors closed. In an age when governments hunger for cultural heritage and tourism dollars, why would they deliberately suppress exploration of ancient ruins? Unless, of course, the stakes are far greater than history books or museum collections. Consider Mesopotamia itself, the land between the rivers where the first cities rose. Many of its sites were first explored in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when European powers sent archaeologists into the deserts. They returned with tablets, statues, and relics that filled museums in London, Paris, and Berlin. Yet they also returned with rumors of tunnels they were not permitted to enter, of chambers filled with inscriptions too dangerous to reveal, of artifacts that disappeared into private collections. Even now, scholars whisper of sealed sections beneath Ur, Nineveh, and Babylon. Whole wings of these ruins remain untouched, not because we lack tools, but because someone, somewhere, has decided they should remain closed. The official reason often cited is preservation. Excavation can indeed damage fragile structures, but what if preservation is not about protecting ruins from us, but protecting us from what lies within the ruins? Ancient texts themselves warn of cursed tablets, forbidden knowledge, and objects imbued with powers not meant for mortals. Could it be that authorities fear opening chambers where such artifacts lie? Or perhaps they already know what is hidden and choose silence over revelation. To excavate is to expose, and exposure is a risk if what lies below could change everything we think we know about history, power, or even humanity itself. There is also the matter of politics. Many ruins sit in regions plagued by conflict, where armies patrol more than archaeologists. Military zones overlap with archaeological sites, and some areas declared too dangerous for excavation are paradoxically heavily guarded. In Iraq, certain mounds remain inaccessible decades after the fall of Saddam Hussein, despite interest from universities around the world. Locals whisper that these sites conceal tunnels, machines, or inscriptions too sensitive to reveal. In Syria, similar restrictions are imposed, with ruins near Deir ez-Zor and Raqqa sealed under the guise of instability. Yet, artifacts from nearby sites make their way quietly into black markets, suggesting that secrecy, not safety, is the true reason. What if these ruins hold evidence of the Anunnaki, not as myths, but as tangible presences? Imagine a sealed chamber beneath a ziggurat containing a sarcophagus not of a king, but of a being of impossible proportions. Imagine tablets that describe in plain words that humanity was engineered, not evolved. Imagine mechanisms that hum faintly even now, untouched since their makers departed. Such discoveries would not simply add footnotes to textbooks. They would detonate the foundations of modern civilization. Religions would fracture. Governments would collapse. Economies built on human exceptionalism would falter. If such evidence exists, the easiest solution is to bury it again, literally and figuratively. Examples abound outside Mesopotamia too. In Egypt, beneath the Giza Plateau, vast tunnels have been detected but remain off-limits to excavation. Officially, the work is paused for conservation. Unofficially, whispers tell of chambers too large, too symmetrical to be natural. In Turkey, at Göbekli Tepe, excavation was halted for years despite evidence that the site is older and more complex than expected. Beneath Peru's pyramids, sealed tunnels stretch for miles, many of them blocked deliberately with rubble. Always the same pattern: ruins accessible at the surface, mysteries sealed below. The deeper you try to dig, the more resistance you encounter. There is also the curious silence in official archaeology. Academic papers rarely mention the forbidden ruins. Funding bodies refuse grants for their study. Media coverage is minimal, yet whispers circulate among local guides, laborers, and villagers who live near the sites. They speak of glowing stones, of inscriptions unlike any others, of foreign teams who arrive quietly and leave without announcement. Some claim that objects unearthed are flown out of the country before they can be cataloged. Others say that those who dig too deeply sometimes do not return. Whether fact or rumor, the consistency of these accounts is haunting. The question then becomes, are these ruins off limits because of what they contain, or because of who might claim them? If the Anunnaki never left, if they still linger in shadow, perhaps these ruins are not abandoned, but guarded. Perhaps the sealed chambers are still in use, not relics, but residences. To open them might not only expose artifacts, but disturb occupants. The priests of old whispered of gods dwelling in the deep earth. What if those whispers were warnings, and the sealed ruins are the locks keeping the boundaries intact? Excavation would then be, not discovery, but provocation, an act of trespass against powers that remain watchful. The very act of sealing carries meaning. Ancient builders went to great lengths to close off certain chambers, using massive stones and inscribed curses. These were not careless closures, but deliberate barriers. They intended those spaces never to be opened, at least not by human hands. To break the seals would be to violate an ancient covenant. The fact that modern authorities continue this tradition, keeping certain ruins off limits, suggests a continuity of knowledge. They may not explain it in the same words, but the practice is the same. Some doors must remain closed, and yet, the human spirit longs to open them. We are driven by curiosity, by hunger for truth, by the dream of reclaiming the full story of our past. The forbidden ruins are like locked books, their silence louder than words. Every restriction, every denied permit, every closed site only fuels speculation. Perhaps that is the greatest danger of all, that secrecy breeds imagination. And imagination refuses to die. Whether the ruins hide artifacts, beings, or nothing at all, the act of keeping them sealed ensures they will never fade from our collective dreams. So we stand at the threshold of forbidden ruins, our questions unanswered, our hands pressed against the fences. We know that something lies within, perhaps relics, perhaps truths, too disruptive to reveal. And the longer these ruins remain sealed, the more we suspect that humanity is being protected not from damage to bricks and stones, but from knowledge that would unravel everything we believe about ourselves. The ruins remain silent, but silence is not emptiness. Silence is intent. Silence is warning. Silence is power. Imagine walking through the ruins of an ancient city at dawn. The air is still, the sky a pale wash of gold, and the stones under your feet radiate the night's stored heat. Then, without warning, you feel it. A subtle tremor. A vibration running through the ground. Not like an earthquake, but like a pulse. It lasts only a moment, then fades. You look around. Nothing moves. No trucks, no wind, no obvious cause. Yet, the sensation lingers in your bones, as if the earth itself were alive and breathing. For centuries, travelers, archaeologists, and locals alike have reported such phenomena near the remains of the world's oldest temples and monuments. An unseen force that seems to hum beneath the stones, whispering of energies we do not yet understand. These reports are scattered but persistent. In Mesopotamia, visitors to certain mounds have described a faint but distinct vibration underfoot, especially near sealed chambers or unexplored foundations. In Egypt, some tourists claim to feel a thrumming beneath the Giza Plateau, particularly near the Sphinx at dawn. In South America, explorers have noted subtle tremors near megalithic walls in Peru, always the same theme: ancient sites, sealed depths, a sense of the ground humming like a hidden engine. Scientists often attribute such sensations to natural causes: subsurface water, minor seismic activity, or the body's own pulse echoing through stone. Yet, the persistence of these accounts across cultures invites a deeper question. What if the ancients built on, or built into, something alive? Mesopotamian texts speak of the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth, domain of the god Enki. It was said to be not only a reservoir of physical water, but a source of spiritual power, the place where creation itself was stirred. Temples dedicated to Enki often included pools or wells, symbolic links to this hidden source. Could the vibrations felt at ancient sites be remnants of that same power, still pulsing beneath the surface after thousands of years? The priests of old whispered of energies harnessed by rituals and architecture, structures designed not just to reach heaven, but to draw up forces from below. Perhaps the ziggurats and temples were more than platforms of worship. Perhaps they were tuning devices, amplifiers of an energy the ancients could sense, but we have forgotten. Consider the design of these structures. Many are built on specific geological features: fault lines, aquifers, magnetic anomalies. Modern engineers have discovered that vibrations can travel differently through such materials, creating standing waves and resonances. What if the ancients knew this and built accordingly? A ziggurat could act like a giant resonator, focusing subterranean vibrations into its core. To a modern visitor, standing at the right point on the right day, the ground might seem to hum with invisible power. To an ancient priest, this would have been proof of the god's presence, the earth itself responding to their rites. Yet there are also more unsettling possibilities. Some believe the vibrations are not natural at all, but mechanical, remnants of devices buried beneath the ruins, still active in some dormant state. Imagine an artifact left by the Anunnaki, a generator or beacon designed to last millennia, its power now reduced to a faint pulse, but still detectable as a vibration underfoot. Such a device might have been the heart of the temple, the true focus of worship, though hidden from the public. The rituals performed above would then be less about appeasing gods and more about interacting with a machine, feeding it with sound, movement, or offerings to maintain its function. Modern technology occasionally corroborates these ideas. Sensitive instruments placed near ancient sites have recorded unexplained low-frequency vibrations, sometimes in patterns that do not match known geological activity. In one case, researchers detected rhythmic pulses near a Mesopotamian mound at regular intervals over several nights, only for the signal to disappear when excavation began. In Egypt, seismic sensors have picked up subtle beats beneath certain pyramids. Officially, these are dismissed as artifacts of equipment or environmental noise. Unofficially, the data remain curious, suggestive of something more than random movement. Local legends often echo these sensations. Villagers near ancient sites speak of nights when the ground breathes, when wells ripple without wind and animals refuse to approach. Some say the vibrations are the footsteps of buried giants, or the stirring of gods beneath the earth. Others believe they mark hidden passages opening and closing far below, mechanisms that have continued operating long after their makers vanished. Even if these stories are metaphorical, they reveal how deeply the phenomenon has impressed itself upon human imagination. Skeptics counter that expectation creates sensation. To stand among ruins charged with myth is to be primed for unusual experiences. A subtle tremor from distant traffic might feel like a cosmic heartbeat when you are surrounded by 5,000-year-old stones. Yet even skeptics cannot explain why reports cluster at specific spots, often coinciding with sealed chambers or unexcavated areas. If it were mere suggestion, one would expect randomness. Instead, there is pattern, a geography of vibration mapped onto the geography of the ancient world. If the Anunnaki never left, the vibrations could be their signal, a low hum of presence beneath our feet. Perhaps they dwell not in distant stars, but in the depths of the earth, their technology hidden in vaults we have mistaken for myth. The vibrations would then be less a mystery and more a message, a subtle reminder that our world is shared. They may not wish to reveal themselves openly, but they allow their heartbeat to be felt by those who venture close enough and listen carefully. Imagine a future excavation where scientists break through to a hidden chamber and find not relics, but machinery still faintly humming. Pipes that channel energy, stones that vibrate with inaudible frequencies, devices whose purpose we cannot guess. The ancients built above these not to conceal them, but to integrate with them, to draw power from the depths. The vibrations we feel today would be the dying echo of that integration, a system still running though no one tends it. Even without such discoveries, the phenomenon teaches us something profound. We think of ruins as dead, inert remnants of the past. But the vibrations remind us they are not dead. They are living interfaces between humanity and the earth, built at places where forces converge. The ancients sensed these forces and built accordingly. We have lost that sensitivity, but occasionally, when we stand in the right place at the right time, we feel it again. A tremor, a pulse, a whisper of power older than civilization. And perhaps that is the true message of the vibrating ground. It is not simply a curiosity or a clue to hidden machines. It is a reminder of connection between earth and sky, between past and present, between humanity and the mysteries that shaped us. Whether natural or artificial, divine or geological, the vibrations tell us that the story is not over. Something still moves beneath the stones. Something still breathes beneath the ruins. Something waits. Imagine walking across a stretch of hardened earth where the wind has swept away centuries of dust, and suddenly you see it. A footprint pressed into stone. At first glance it looks ordinary. 5 toes, an arch, the familiar shape of a human foot. But then you notice the size. It is not the impression of a man, or even the largest giant among us. It is far larger, measuring not in inches but in feet, the span of it dwarfing anything that could belong to Homo sapiens. You crouch, press your own shoe into the stone beside it, and the comparison is absurd, like a child's mark next to a colossus. These fossilized footprints, found in deserts, riverbeds, and cliffsides around the world, confront us with a question humanity has never truly answered. Who or what left them? The phenomenon is not limited to one culture or one region. In South Africa, giant footprints more than 4 feet long are embedded in granite. In Turkey, imprints of massive humanoid feet are reported near ancient quarries. In North America, native traditions speak of thunder beings whose steps shook the earth, and fossilized impressions in stone seem to echo those stories. In the plains of Iraq and Iran, explorers have stumbled upon depressions that look eerily like footprints but far larger than any human could have made. Some of these impressions are dismissed as natural erosion, others as hoaxes. Yet, enough remain unexplained that the question cannot be brushed aside. Are these the marks of beings humanity once walked beside? The myths are filled with giants. The Sumerians told of the Anunnaki, towering figures who descended from the heavens to rule the earth. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim, the giants in the earth, who were born when the sons of gods mingled with the daughters of men. The Greeks told of the Titans, enormous beings cast into the depths by Zeus. In Norse lore, frost giants shaped the world from the bones of Ymir. Again and again, cultures across the globe remembered a time when beings of vast stature walked among mortals. The fossilized footprints, silent and immovable, seemed to whisper that these were not mere legends, but memories, carved not only in story, but in stone. Skeptics argue that the footprints are misidentified impressions, ancient animal tracks, eroded hollows, or carved fakes designed to lure the gullible, and in some cases, they are right. Hoaxes have been exposed, natural formations debunked, but others defy easy explanation. Some show clear anatomical detail, arches, toes, heels, perfectly proportioned but vastly oversized. Geological analysis sometimes confirms that the rock layers are millions of years old, predating modern humans by unimaginable spans. If genuine, these footprints suggest either that giants walked the earth long before us, or that time itself is stranger than we think, layering traces of different epochs together in impossible ways. To stand before one of these prints is to feel a shift in perspective. You are no longer the apex of creation, no longer the largest, strongest, or most enduring form. You are small, temporary, walking in the shadow of beings who left marks that outlived empires. The footprint becomes a symbol of humility, a reminder that humanity's story is not the only story written into the earth. It is also a challenge. If giants once walked here, where are they now? Did they vanish? Or did they retreat, hiding in realms beyond our sight? The priests of Sumer whispered of gods in the deep earth. Perhaps the footprints are the last traces of their journeys on the surface. There are modern sightings, too. Shepherds in deserts, hikers in mountains, even soldiers in remote war zones have reported stumbling upon enormous tracks in soft soil or sand, prints too large to explain by known animals, prints that vanish as suddenly as they appear. Often no photographs are taken, or those that are remain blurry and inconclusive. But the consistency of the descriptions echoes the fossilized evidence. Toes, heels, human-like proportions, but on a scale that suggests beings far beyond us. If even one of these accounts is true, it would mean that the fossilized prints are not relics of a distant past, but reminders that such beings may still exist, moving rarely and leaving only fleeting marks. Scientists are hesitant to engage with such ideas, fearing ridicule. Yet, some quietly admit that the fossilized footprints remain puzzling. If they are natural formations, why do they so often resemble human feet? If they are hoaxes, why do so many predate the modern era of forgery? And if they are genuine, then the implications are staggering. It would mean that humanity has not always walked alone, that our ancestors may have shared the earth with beings of immense size, whether alien visitors, genetic experiments, or members of an earlier branch of evolution now erased. The Anunnaki hypothesis fits too well to ignore. Described in ancient texts as towering beings who bestowed kingship, knowledge, and law, their size was part of their authority. To stand beside a god who towered over you was to feel the truth of your dependence. If such beings walked the earth, their steps would leave impressions unlike any humans. The fossilized footprints may be the literal residue of their reigns, scattered across continents as silent evidence that the myths were not exaggerations, but reports. If they withdrew into the deep earth or returned to the stars, their footprints remain, carved into stone as their unintentional legacy. One cannot help but imagine the moment those footprints were made, a giant striding across soft clay, unaware that the ground would harden into rock, preserving the moment for eternity. Did they know we would one day find them? Did they intend to leave signs of their presence, or were the footprints mere accidents, as casual as our footprints on a beach? The difference is immense. If deliberate, the footprints are messages, proof left for future humanity. If accidental, they are even more haunting, reminders that their lives were as ordinary to them as ours are to us, that walking across the earth was not spectacle, but routine. The footprints also raise another question. If beings of such size once walked here, what structures did they build? Could some of the megaliths we marvel at, stones weighing hundreds of tons, moved with unknown precision, have been crafted not by armies of men, but by the hands of giants? The alignment of myths and stones suggests so. The footprints, then, are not anomalies but missing links, the personal imprints of those who raised the monuments we still cannot explain. To dismiss them is to dismiss a potential key to understanding the very origins of civilization. And still they endure, weathered by time, but not erased. Fossilized footprints too large for humans remind us that the earth carries memories older than any book, older than any empire. They invite us to imagine a time when scale itself was different, when humanity was not the measure of all things. They urge us to question whether the giants truly vanished or whether they still move among us, hidden in shadow, leaving only occasional traces as they pass. To walk beside one of these prints is to feel the veil between myth and reality thin, to know that the stories of our ancestors may not be allegory, but history. So, the next time you see a footprint in stone, do not dismiss it too quickly. It may be nothing, or it may be everything, the mark of a presence too vast to deny, too fleeting to capture, too ancient to forget. Fossilized footprints too large for humans are not just curiosities. They are invitations carved into the earth itself, urging us to remember that we are not the only ones who have walked this world, and perhaps not the last. Imagine walking down a crowded street in a modern city. Cars rushing past, neon lights flickering, faces scrolling endlessly in a tide of humanity. Somewhere in that sea of strangers, someone glances at you. Their face seems ordinary, yet something about their eyes catches your breath. A flicker too intense, a gaze that feels older than time. They smile and vanish into the crowd, leaving you unsettled. You tell yourself it was nothing. But what if it wasn't? What if the Anunnaki, the beings of immense power and size described in ancient texts, never truly left but adapted, hiding in plain sight, walking among us in forms we would never suspect? Ancient myths are full of gods who take on disguises. In Sumer, Inanna could appear as a mortal woman, her beauty concealing her divine nature. Enki was known to shapeshift, slipping into different forms to accomplish his aims. In Greece, Zeus walked the earth disguised as a shepherd, a swan, even a beggar. In Hindu lore, Vishnu descends as avatars, fish, dwarf, prince, to restore balance without revealing his full nature. Again and again the pattern repeats. Beings of immense power choose to hide their true form to move among mortals unseen. If this motif arose from real encounters rather than imagination, it suggests that concealment is not only possible, but common. Skeptics scoff at the idea. How could a being described as towering over humans shrink to human size? How could someone so powerful hide in a world of cameras, biometrics, and DNA tests? Yet the ancients never described the Anunnaki as bound to one shape. Their power included mastery of forms, the ability to manifest differently to different eyes. Modern physics speaks of dimensions beyond our perception, of particles that exist as waves until observed. If reality itself is more fluid than we assume, then form may be only an interface, a chosen appearance rather than an inherent identity. A being could project a body just as we project an avatar online. Imagine such a being stepping off a plane, passing through customs, living in a high-rise apartment, working a job. They might appear as a charismatic leader, a reclusive genius, a wandering mystic, or simply an unremarkable face in the crowd. Their goal would not be to conquer, but to observe, to guide, perhaps to influence at critical moments. They would not need armies or temples. Their power would be subtle, woven into decisions, technologies, and ideas. If the Anunnaki shaped our civilization once, perhaps now they shape it quietly, steering from within rather than ruling from above. There are stories, rumors whispered on the edges of conspiracy and folklore, of people who met someone extraordinary. A stranger who knew too much, spoke every language, never aged, vanished without a trace. Corporate whistleblowers tell of consultants who appear at pivotal times, leaving behind breakthroughs that alter industries. Political aides hint at advisors whose origins cannot be verified. Even in entertainment, myths of men in black echo this archetype, beings who blend in but are not what they seem. Whether fact or fiction, these stories align with the ancient pattern. Gods in disguise, moving unseen. If the Anunnaki do walk among us, their motives remain opaque. Are they guardians, ensuring humanity does not destroy itself? Are they researchers, studying the outcome of their ancient experiment? Or are they opportunists, feeding on influence, steering events for purposes we cannot fathom? Their disguises would be perfect precisely because they exploit our expectations. We look for wings, halos, or glowing eyes. We do not look for the quiet engineer, the anonymous donor, the kindly stranger who nudges history at the right moment. Consider also the psychological impact. To believe that anyone around you could be an Anunnaki in disguise is to erode the boundaries between myth and reality. It introduces both awe and paranoia. Every extraordinary talent, every act of genius, every improbable rise to power becomes suspect. Did this leader emerge through effort or through hidden lineage? Did this scientist discover, or was knowledge whispered into their ear? The idea unsettles because it decentralizes humanity from its own story. suggesting we are still being guided or manipulated by forces we cannot see. The ancients might have anticipated this. Their texts often stress the importance of discernment, of testing strangers, of hospitality offered even to the lowliest visitor, because gods might walk among men. In Mesopotamian law codes, protections for travelers and foreigners stand out, as if born of a time when the line between mortal and divine guest was thin. Hospitality was not just kindness, it was caution, an acknowledgement that you never knew who was sitting at your table. In that sense, the idea of Anunnaki among us is not alien but deeply human, woven into our oldest ethics. Modern science, ironically, may make disguise easier. Cosmetic surgery, digital identities, and global mobility allow anyone to vanish and reappear. A being with even slightly advanced technology could manipulate biometrics, falsify records, and blend seamlessly. They would not need to stand 7 feet tall or radiate light. They would need only to mimic us convincingly enough to avoid suspicion, and perhaps to subtly influence those around them. In a world of billions, even a handful of such beings could shape outcomes dramatically without ever revealing themselves. The question then shifts from could they to would they? If the Anunnaki truly created or guided humanity, walking among us in disguise might be their natural mode of operation now. Open rule belongs to the past. Quiet influence belongs to the present. And perhaps they disguise themselves not out of malice, but out of necessity. To appear openly would collapse the experiment, end free will, and provoke chaos. To guide from within preserves the illusion of autonomy while steering the larger arc of civilization. Yet there is an eerie symmetry to this possibility. Just as we now build artificial intelligence, avatars, and simulations that act within our systems unseen, perhaps we are reenacting what was done to us. We create digital beings that move among our data unnoticed. They guide, sort, and decide, shaping our lives invisibly. We accept their influence because we cannot see their true form. If the Anunnaki walk among us, perhaps they are the original invisible agents, the template for our own creations. And so, we return to that crowded street. Faces rush past, each one a mystery. Somewhere among them may be a being who remembers the building of ziggurats, who stood beside kings millennia ago, who now walks as a stranger with a coffee cup and a cell phone. You will not know them. You will not recognize them. But perhaps you will feel it, a flicker, a resonance, a sense that behind the ordinary exterior is something vast. This is not proof but intuition, the same intuition that made our ancestors lower their voices and speak of gods in disguise. Whether real or imagined, the idea changes us. It invites humility, curiosity, vigilance. It suggests that our world is still larger, stranger, and more populated than we think. And perhaps that is its true power. Whether or not the Anunnaki walk among us in disguise, the possibility keeps alive the ancient awareness that we are part of a story not entirely our own, a story still being written by unseen hands. Imagine a candlelit chamber beneath a modern city, walls lined with books older than the nations above them, sigils etched into stone floors, and a small circle of figures seated in silence. They wear no obvious uniforms, yet there is a unity to their posture, a gravity to their presence. This is not a scene from fiction, but a reflection of whispers that have followed humanity for centuries. Secret societies whose members claim not only ancient knowledge, but ancient bloodlines, lineages that stretch back to beings who were not entirely human. In their private rituals, they do not merely honor the Anunnaki. They claim to be their heirs. Across history, secret societies have guarded forbidden knowledge, from the priesthoods of Mesopotamia to the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, from medieval alchemists to modern fraternal orders. The pattern persists, an inner circle preserving truths too potent for the masses. Most of these groups are dismissed as elitist clubs or romantic myths. But scattered among them are societies whose claims are more extraordinary. They speak not of symbolic descent, but of literal ancestry, bloodlines tracing back to gods, giants, or visitors from beyond the stars. In Mesopotamia, kingship was said to descend from heaven. The Sumerian king list records reigns lasting thousands of years before the flood, attributed not to men, but to divine rulers. The priests who served them believed they were intermediaries, carrying divine seed, the me of civilization encoded into their blood as well as their tablets. When the flood ended that era, power passed to mortal kings. But the idea of sacred descent remained. To claim lineage from the Anunnaki was to claim legitimacy itself, a right to rule by virtue of ancestry. This idea did not vanish with Sumer. It rippled through time, resurfacing in claims of divine right in medieval Europe, of blue blood in aristocracies, and of secret lineages maintained in silence. Modern secret societies inherit this motif. Some trace their symbols directly to Mesopotamia: winged discs, stylized bulls, stepped pyramids. Others veil their origins in allegory, speaking of those who came before or founders from the stars. In private, initiates are told stories of bloodlines preserved through selective breeding, of families chosen to carry forward a spark from the gods. These claims are impossible to verify, yet eerily consistent. Even groups that outwardly appear to have no connection, European orders, Middle Eastern brotherhoods, esoteric sects in Asia, speak in parallel languages about ancient patrons who never left. Why maintain such a claim in secret rather than openly? Because, in a world governed by science and democracy, to say one descends from gods is to invite ridicule. Yet, to believe it privately is to justify power, privilege, and secrecy. If you think your blood carries something more than human, you will see yourself as a guardian of destiny rather than a participant in chance. You will guard knowledge not only out of self-interest, but out of a sense of mission, an inheritance from beings who shaped humanity and who may still be watching. The rituals of these societies often mimic ancient rites. Initiates descend into dark chambers, passing through symbolic gates, as Inanna did in her journey to the underworld. They are blindfolded, stripped of status, subjected to tests, then reborn into a new identity. The symbolism echoes Sumerian myths, not by accident, but by design, claiming continuity with the first civilization. In some societies, oaths are sworn not to God, but to the Watchers, a term linked to the same celestial beings who descended that appear in Mesopotamian and biblical texts. Their libraries, if they exist, are said to contain translations of tablets never revealed to the public, instructions left by the Anunnaki for their descendants. Skeptics argue that all of this is myth-making, a way for elites to cloak their power in mystique, and often it is. Yet the persistence of the theme across continents suggests a deeper origin. How did secret societies in widely separated cultures converge on the same narrative of descent from beings beyond human? Coincidence, or a shared ancestral memory carefully cultivated in shadows? Some researchers have noted that symbols of the Anunnaki, winged beings, rosettes, intertwined serpents, appear in the heraldry and insignia of modern orders with no stated connection to Mesopotamia. Are these unconscious borrowings or quiet acknowledgments of lineage? Consider also the pattern of influence. Many breakthroughs in science, finance, and politics emerge from networks of people linked by quiet associations. While conspiracy theories exaggerate this into omnipotence, there is truth in the existence of hidden networks shaping events. If even a fraction of their members believe they carry a mandate from the Anunnaki, their actions would be guided by a sense of destiny invisible to outsiders. They would not think of themselves as conspirators, but as custodians, carrying forward a plan begun thousands of years ago. What would such a plan be? Perhaps to guide humanity toward readiness for the return of the gods. Perhaps to prepare the world for a revelation that would otherwise shatter it. Or perhaps simply to maintain control, ensuring that when the Anunnaki do return, their chosen bloodlines still hold the keys to power. The secrecy then becomes not just self-protection, but strategy, a way of keeping the masses unaware until the appointed time. In this light, secret societies claiming descent are not eccentric, but integral, the hidden hand of a story still unfolding. Yet, there is a more unsettling possibility. What if the secret societies are not merely descendants, but hosts? What if the Anunnaki, rather than walking among us openly, inhabit bloodlines as vessels, moving from generation to generation, influencing from within? The rituals of possession described in ancient texts, gods entering priests, divine essence transmitted through lineage, could be literal rather than symbolic. In this view, the societies are not only preserving a legacy, but maintaining a pipeline for the Anunnaki to act in the world without revealing themselves. The claim of descent would then be both true and misleading. They are not human heirs of gods, but humans carrying gods. The idea is audacious, but it explains much. It would account for the secrecy, the continuity of symbols, the subtle influence across centuries. It would explain why some individuals seem to act with uncanny foresight or wield disproportionate impact. And it would echo the ancient warning that the gods never left but retreated into shadow, their presence hidden not beneath the earth, but within selected bloodlines walking among us. Whether true or not, the power of this belief is undeniable. It shapes the identity of those who hold it, imbuing them with purpose and patience. It shapes our culture too, feeding endless stories of hidden rulers, alien ancestry, and secret bloodlines. It keeps alive the ancient intuition that our history is larger than we think, that forces older than humanity still move in its veins. Even as science maps our DNA and history reconstructs our past, the myth of descent from the Anunnaki persists, whispered in lodges and catacombs, carried like a hidden gene through time. And perhaps that is the point. Whether or not these societies truly descend from gods, they act as vessels for a narrative that refuses to die. They keep the story alive, waiting for a moment when it can be revealed or fulfilled. As long as they gather in secret, as long as candles burn in hidden chambers, as long as oaths are sworn to unseen patrons, the possibility endures that the Anunnaki never left, and that their heirs walk among us still, not openly but in shadow. Imagine a lineage so old its roots disappear into myth, a thread of ancestry running like a hidden river beneath the surface of history. Imagine families whose names you will never read in textbooks, who marry only within a circle known to themselves, who pass down not wealth but a secret duty, to protect a king who does not reign, a sovereign who does not appear, a presence hidden from the eyes of the world. This is the essence of the Whispers, stories of bloodlines tasked not with ruling openly but with guarding something or someone too important to reveal. The rumors claim that somewhere, in forgotten palaces or underground sanctuaries, kings still live, not as ceremonial figures, but as hidden anchors of an ancient order, shielded by descendants of the Anunnaki themselves. Throughout history, kingship in Mesopotamia was said to descend from heaven. Before mortal rulers, the Anunnaki themselves reigned. When they withdrew, they supposedly left behind chosen lines, families entrusted with fragments of their power, guardians of sacred objects, and perhaps of living beings. The Sumerian king list records reigns of thousands of years, ending with cryptic statements that kingship was taken to the heavens. But some interpretations suggest kingship was not removed, but concealed. The king did not die, he withdrew, hidden for a future age, protected by bloodlines whose loyalty transcended time. This theme echoes far beyond Sumer. In Egypt, the concept of the hidden pharaoh appears in esoteric texts, a ruler whose reign continues in secret after the visible throne is lost. In medieval Europe, legends of the Fisher King and the Sleeping Arthur promise that the rightful sovereign will return when the land most needs him. In Islam, the hidden imam is said to live in occultation, protected by chosen followers until his reappearance. In each case, the pattern is the same: a king removed from sight but not from existence, a cadre of guardians preserving his safety and his claim. Could these be distorted memories of a single, far older tradition, the hidden kings of the Anunnaki, shielded by their bloodlines even now? The idea is more than myth to those who claim it. Secretive families across cultures whisper of a duty that spans centuries. Their genealogies are guarded as fiercely as their rituals. They speak not of wealth, but of stewardship, of an obligation inherited like a gene. Some claim their ancestors were priests sworn to protect those who came before as they entered the earth. Others speak of oaths taken before a king whose name they dare not utter. In private, they refer to the sleeping one, the absent master, the hidden sovereign. These are not titles of metaphor, but of memory, as if describing an actual being who still lives, preserved and concealed. Skeptics dismiss such tales as noble families flattering themselves with grandiose myths. Yet the consistency of these stories across continents is striking. How did European legends of hidden monarchs mirror Islamic doctrines of occulted leaders, which in turn mirror Mesopotamian hints of withdrawn kings? The same archetype reappears wherever the Anunnaki left their mark. Perhaps the bloodlines are not inventing, but remembering, their identities shaped by an ancient compact. Imagine what such a hidden kingship would require: secrecy across generations, false histories to mislead outsiders, relocation whenever discovery threatens. The Guardians would need to infiltrate governments, control records, obscure traces. They would not rule openly but from the margins, ensuring that when the time came, the king could re-emerge with legitimacy intact. Their power would not be obvious wealth, but invisible influence, quietly shaping events to protect the unseen sovereign. They might appear as financiers, scholars, philanthropists, or even ordinary people. Yet, beneath the surface, every action would be in service of their ancient duty. Some claim that the hidden king is not merely human, but a being of Anunnaki lineage, preserved either by longevity or by technology unknown to us. In this view, the bloodlines are not only protectors but also kin, chosen because they carry enough of the original essence to interface with the king, to understand and sustain his needs. The rituals they perform are less superstition than maintenance, sustaining a state of suspended life or altered existence. If true, this would mean the Anunnaki never fully departed, but left behind at least one of their own, a living relic of their reign waiting for the right moment to awaken. There are even whispers that the hidden king has appeared at times of crisis, moving anonymously to steer history. A leader without a throne, shaping outcomes through proxies, influencing from behind the curtain. When wars are averted, when sudden alliances form, when inexplicable breakthroughs occur, some see the hand of the hidden sovereign. Not proof, but pattern. Not revelation, but rumor. The Guardians, for their part, would never confirm it. Their role is not to proclaim, but to conceal. The psychological effect of such a belief is profound. For those in the bloodlines, it creates identity, purpose, and restraint. They do not act merely for profit, but for continuity, living as links in a chain whose end they will never see. For the wider world, it creates a sense of unease, the possibility that visible power is only theater, that behind presidents and parliaments stands a lineage older than any nation, answering not to the public, but to a hidden throne. Whether true or not, the idea feeds our fascination with conspiracies and secret rulers, our instinct that history is shaped by forces we cannot see. The symbols of these bloodlines appear in plain sight, but go unnoticed. Coats of arms with winged discs echoing Anunnaki iconography. Family mottos referring to stars, watchers, or descent from heaven. Ceremonies held at solstices and equinoxes, echoing ancient Mesopotamian rites. These are not coincidences, but continuities, threads woven through time. Even when a family outwardly assimilates, changing religion or nationality, the underlying pattern persists. Names repeated, marriages arranged, archives hidden, all in service of the hidden king. If the whispers are true, then our age may be approaching the moment for which the Guardians have waited. The world grows interconnected, myths spread instantly, and knowledge long buried becomes accessible. Perhaps the king they protect is stirring, preparing to step into the open. Perhaps the bloodlines are moving pieces into place for his return. Or perhaps they are simply preserving an artifact of history, a living fossil of a time when gods ruled men. In either case, the secrecy remains absolute. The first rule of guarding a hidden king is never to admit he exists. Yet even secrecy leaves traces. The rumors, the symbols, the uncanny coincidences, they form a map for those who look closely. Following it is like following a river underground, hearing its rush but never seeing it. We cannot say with certainty that hidden kings exist, or that bloodlines protect them, but we can say that the idea has shaped history, guided decisions, and inspired loyalty beyond reason. Whether reality or myth, it exerts power, and perhaps that is the point. The Anunnaki, if they never left, may not wish to rule openly anymore. They may wish to rule through memory, through lineage, through the quiet devotion of those who believe themselves protectors. In this sense, the hidden king is both person and symbol, both sovereign and secret. The bloodlines are both guardians and prisoners of their own myth, bound by oaths older than nations. They whisper because to speak aloud would break the spell, and the spell is what sustains their world. So, the next time you read of an unassuming family with roots in forgotten places, or a legend of a king who sleeps until the world is ready, remember the whispers. They are not merely stories of the past, but signals of a possibility still alive beneath the surface of history, that somewhere, shielded by bloodlines, a king waits, and and with him, the truth of humanity's oldest alliance. Imagine a morning like any other. You wake, check your phone, scroll through headlines. Then one story freezes you mid-breath. A craft of impossible size has appeared over a desert, shimmering in the dawn. Or perhaps not a craft, but a procession. Figures descending a mountain, walking across a plain, each one taller than any human, their eyes burning like a memory you have never lived but somehow recognize. The Anunnaki have revealed themselves again. In that instant, every myth you have ever heard ceases to be story and becomes reality. What happens next is not just history, it is transformation. For thousands of years, humanity has speculated about the return of its makers. Prophets spoke of it, secret societies prepared for it, skeptics mocked it. But if the Anunnaki appeared openly, there would be no more speculation. The boundary between religion and science would collapse overnight. Every sacred text describing gods descending from heaven would be reread as eyewitness testimony. Every skeptical dismissal of ancient astronauts would evaporate. History would rearrange itself like a shaken mosaic, its tiles falling into a new image we had not dared to see. The first impact would be psychological. For centuries, we have believed ourselves the apex of creation, masters of our own destiny. The sudden arrival of beings vastly older and more advanced would shatter that self-image. Some would feel awe, others terror, still others rage. Religions would split, some claiming prophecy fulfilled, others denouncing the newcomers as deceivers. Governments would scramble to respond, unsure whether to greet them, fight them, or surrender authority. Markets would convulse. Armies would mobilize without clear orders. The idea of nation-states might dissolve under the weight of a species-wide confrontation with something beyond us. The second impact would be political. Who speaks for Earth? In a moment of contact, all our divisions, borders, languages, rivalries would become trivial, yet our egos would persist. Some leaders would claim special relationships with the Anunnaki. Secret societies that whispered of dissent would step into the light, presenting themselves as intermediaries, interpreters, or rightful heirs. If even one of those claims were true, power would shift overnight from elected governments to ancient bloodlines. The world would find itself ruled not by democracy, but by legacy, by those who say they have prepared for this day for millennia. Then there is the question of technology. If the Anunnaki revealed themselves, they would not arrive empty-handed. The devices hinted at in myths, the tablets of destiny, the weapons that split mountains, the crafts that crossed stars, would now stand before us. Would they share their knowledge freely, uplift us to their level, or offer it conditionally? A single gift, energy without cost, medicine without limits, could end poverty and disease. Yet, the same gift could destabilize economies, end industries, and erase the structures that hold society together. The choice of what to give and to whom would shape the future as much as the revelation itself. And what of their motives? Would the Anunnaki return as parents checking on their children, as landlords reclaiming property, as judges weighing a verdict, or as something entirely alien to our moral frameworks? Myths offer every possibility: gods who bless, gods who punish, gods who test. If they came as benefactors, humanity would face the challenge of sudden abundance, freedom from toil, but also freedom from purpose. If they came as rulers, we would face the loss of autonomy. If they came as observers, offering nothing but their presence, we would face a mirror held up to our civilization, forcing us to ask what we have become in their absence. Consider the cultural shock. Art, literature, philosophy, all would transform. The hidden undercurrents of myth would surge to the surface. Museums would empty as artifacts once called symbolic were reclassified as historical. Temples might fill or empty, depending on how the newcomers framed themselves. Science would expand overnight, forced to incorporate technologies and principles we had never imagined. But science might also fracture, its slow, cumulative method overwhelmed by revelation. The world would swing between euphoria and despair, between unity and chaos. There is also the possibility of resistance. Not all humans would welcome the return. Some would see the Anunnaki as imposters, invaders, or demons. Militias might rise, convinced they are defending Earth from deception. Terrorist groups might target their representatives. Governments might try to weaponize their technology or hold them hostage. The Anunnaki's response to such hostility would determine whether the revelation became a new golden age or a second cataclysm. Myths of floods and fires may not be memories, but warnings of what happens when the gods return to find humanity unprepared. If secret societies truly guard hidden kings or artifacts, their role would suddenly become visible. They might emerge as mediators, presenting themselves as the bridge between humanity and its makers. Or they might splinter, some aligning with the Anunnaki, others opposing them. Decades of whispered loyalty would be tested by open power. The myths of hidden bloodlines protecting sovereigns would no longer be stories. They would be political realities shaping the fate of billions. Yet, beyond politics and technology, the deepest change would be existential. To see the Anunnaki with our own eyes would answer one question: are they real? But open 1,000 more. What is humanity? Are we their creation, their kin, their experiment? Do we possess free will, or have we been shepherded all along? The revelation would not simply add a chapter to our history. It would rewrite our identity from the ground up. We would be forced to confront our myths as memories, our religions as contracts, our science as a narrow window onto a much larger reality. And yet, even as we imagine the upheaval, there is a subtler possibility. What if the Anunnaki revealed themselves not with spectacle, but with subtlety? One leader at a time, one technology at a time, shaping rather than shocking? What if their return is not a single event, but a process already underway, a slow unveiling that we mistake for progress? In that case, the revelation has already begun. We are living it, unaware, each breakthrough, each paradigm shift another step in their reappearance. When the moment of open contact finally comes, we may realize it has been decades in the making. So what happens if they reveal themselves again? Everything and nothing. Everything. Because our world will change irreversibly, politically, culturally, spiritually. Nothing. Because perhaps they have been here all along, and the revelation will only make explicit what was always true. We will not wake into a new reality, but into an old one we had forgotten. The reality our ancestors tried to tell us about in clay and stone. The Anunnaki's return will not create a new world. It will uncover the real world, hidden beneath layers of denial and myth. The final question is not what they will do, but what we will do. Will we kneel as our ancestors did, awed and obedient? Will we stand defiant, claiming autonomy? Or will we try to meet them as equals, bridging the gap between maker and made? The answer may determine whether their revelation becomes apocalypse or apotheosis. The myths left us clues but not conclusions. The rest is up to us.